you cannot coordinate an international response from the beach. A dereliction of duty by the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, a government totally unprepared for the scenario that it had 18 months to prepare for.
A Tory sleaze and corruption scandal on a scale not seen since the 1990s. Tory cuts and tax rises that will leave millions of people worse off. A litany of broken promises, from HS2 to carbon capture, social care, the triple lock on pensions. And who can possibly forget the £20 billion bridge to Ireland that evaporated into thin air? At the centre of all this is one man, a Prime Minister who is floundering in failure. So, can I ask the Prime Minister, with his party falling in the polls, his colleagues briefing against him, has he considered calling it a day before he's pushed out the door?
But when the Prime Minister gives the green light to corruption, he corrodes that trust. When he says that the rules to stop vested interests don't apply to his friends, he corrodes that trust. And when he deliberately undermines those charged with stopping corruption, he corrodes that trust. And that is exactly what the Prime Minister did last week. And now today, he does not even have the decency to come here either to defend what he did or to apologise for his actions. Rather than repairing the damage that he's done, the Prime Minister is running scared. When required to lead, he's chosen to hide.
Last Christmas, while we were in lockdown, millions of people were unable to be with their families. Thousands of people waved through their care home windows at loved ones, wishing them a Merry Christmas from the side of the road. People died without that last touch from their daughters, their sons, their wives. Working in intensive care, I wept behind my mask as 3 children, talking to their dying mother on an iPad, begged her to wake up. Countless children now growing up without parents, while parties were held at Number 10. Mr. Speaker, this is disgraceful. This is an insult to everyone who followed the rules. It is an insult to everyone who wasn't allowed to say their final goodbye. This happened on the Prime Minister's watch. So my question is very simple. How does the Prime Minister sleep at night?
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is so weak that without Labour votes last night, vital public health measures wouldn't have got through. But this country can't... Says it's not true. Oh, God. I haven't got... It's not true. He's so socially distant from the truth. He thinks that that's not true. I don't know where to... We better press on. We can't go on with a Prime Minister who's too weak to lead. So will the Prime Minister take time this Christmas to look in the mirror and ask himself whether he has the trust and authority to lead this country?
Having campaigned, and she did too, I think, didn't she? I think. Oh yes, she campaigned to remain in the EU. Oh yes, she did. They now have the barefaced cheek to come to this House of Commons and say that they want to cut VAT on fuel, when everybody knows, and he did too, Mr. Speaker, everybody knows full well it would be absolutely impossible if they were to do what Labour would do and go back into the EU, remain aligned with the EU single market. That is the objective of the Labour Party. They can't be trusted on Brexit, Mr. Speaker, and they can't be trusted on the economy.
So, Prime Minister, how's it going? Are you okay? And every time we are faced with a challenge, he denies there's a problem. He tries to laugh it off. He looks for someone else to blame. So can I suggest to the Prime Minister, it's not about brushing your hair, it's about brushing up on your act. And it is incredibly disappointing, but not unsurprising, that the Prime Minister, of whom I asked this question, is not here today, despite not having any official engagements. And I think, Mr. Speaker, his absence speaks volumes, as does his smirks on the media. The public have already drawn their own conclusions. He can run, but he can't hide.
This week was supposed to be Operation Save Big Dog, but it's quickly become Operation Dog's Dinner. Over the past few days, we've had more damaging revelations about Downing Street rule-making, more evidence that Parliament has been misled, and an even longer list of ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous excuses from the Prime Minister. First he claimed there were no parties. Then he wasn't present. Then he admitted he was at them, but he didn't know it was a party. And then, Mr. Speaker, the latest sorry excuse is really the most pathetic of them all. Nobody told me. Nobody told me. Nobody told the Prime Minister he was breaking his own rules. Absolutely pathetic. The Prime Minister, you know, what a look. The Prime Minister laughing once again, laughing at the British public. The Prime Minister is taking the public for fools. Nobody believes him. Will the Prime Minister finally take responsibility? Resign. Go, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like many on these benches, I spent weeks and months defending the Prime Minister against often angry constituents. I've reminded them of his success in delivering Brexit and on the vaccine and many other things. But I expect my leaders to shoulder the responsibility for the actions they take. Yesterday, he did the opposite of that. So I'll remind him of a quotation altogether too familiar to him of Leo Amery to Neville Chamberlain. You have sat there too long for all the good you have done. In the name of God, go.
Sue Gray matter to the police, having found evidence of behaviour that's potentially a criminal offence. Prime Minister, if you do not understand the significance of what happened yesterday, then I really do despair. Does the Prime Minister really not understand the damage his behaviour is doing to our country? Mr. Speaker, this was the Prime Minister who went into hiding for 5 days because of these allegations. Whatever he says in his statement later today or tomorrow won't change the facts. Isn't this a Prime Minister and a government that have shown nothing but contempt for the decency, honesty and respect that define this country?
Every moment that the Prime Minister lingers, every nick in this death by 1,000 cuts is sucking attention from the real issues facing the public. Tory cuts, Brexit and the soaring cost of living have pushed millions of families into poverty. The impending national insurance tax hike hangs like a guillotine while they eat cake. This is nothing short of a crisis. And the only route out, the only route to restore public trust is for the Prime Minister to go. How much longer will Tory MPs let this go on for? How much more damage are they willing to do? It is time to get this over with. Show the Prime Minister the door.
Happy unbirthday to him. Happy unbirthday to him. Because just like the Mad Hatter, he didn't need the excuse of a birthday to have a party, but it did help, didn't it? So when he had groups of people singing to him when illegal gatherings indoor were illegal and communal singing was banned, my constituents think that he has lied. My constituents think that he lied to this House, and my constituents think he lied to them when he was partying and telling them all...
Order. In passing what your constituents say, but you can't continue to labour that one point. Lord Russell-Moyle.
So, I would prefer to be led by a lawyer than a liar. Will he now resign?
A nurse who organised a small socially distanced demonstration against this government's pay cuts was fined £10,000. People out there are sick to the back teeth of it being one rule for the Tories and another for everyone else. The Prime Minister, for once, needs to do a decent thing. For God's sake, resign.
I can't tell you how many times people have said to me that this Prime Minister's lack of integrity is somehow priced in, that his behaviour and character don't matter. I have never accepted that, and I never will accept that. Whatever your politics, whichever party you vote for, honesty and decency matters. Our great democracy depends on it, and cherishing and nurturing British democracy is what it means to be patriotic. There are members opposite who know that, and they know the Prime Minister is incapable of it. The question they must now ask themselves is, what are they going to do about it? They can heap their reputations, the reputation of their party, the reputation of this country on the bonfire that is his leadership, or they can spare the country from a Prime Minister totally unworthy of his responsibilities. It is their duty to do so. They know better than anyone how unsuitable he is for high office. Many of them knew in their hearts that we would inevitably come to this one day. And they know that as night follows day, continuing his leadership will mean further misconduct, cover-up and deceit. It is only they that can end this farce. The eyes of the country are upon them. They will be judged by the decisions they take now.
The COVID regulations impose significant restrictions on the freedoms of members of the public. They had a right to expect their Prime Minister to have read the rules, to understand the meaning of the rules, and indeed those around him to have done so too, and to set an example in following those rules. What the Gray report does show is that Number 10 Downing Street was not observing the regulations they had imposed on members of the public. So either my right honourable friend had not read the rules, or didn't understand what they meant, and others around him, or they didn't think the rules applied to Number 10. Which was it?
Does my right honourable friend recall that ever since he joined the party's candidates list 30 years ago, until we got him into Number 10, he has enjoyed my full-throated support? But I am deeply concerned by these events, and very concerned indeed by some of the things he has said from that dispatch box and has said to the British public and our constituents. When he kindly invited me to see him 10 days ago, I told him that I thought he should think very carefully about what was now in the best interests of our country and of the Conservative Party. And I have to tell him he no longer enjoys my support.
The public and this House have been frustrated by having to wait for Sue Gray, wait for the Metropolitan Police, and today the Prime Minister has announced his new office at Number 10. Please can he let this House know what specific structures are going to be put in place so that this House can hold it accountable?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can my right honourable friend first of all remind the Leader of the Opposition and the Labour Party that the backbenches of the Conservative Party need no reminders about how to dispose of a failing leader? And can he also, when he is restructuring Number 10, concentrate on the fact that the country wants results? The country, we can't see the point of such a large Number 10 superstructure, that it needs to be slimmed down and streamlined. And can I commend his determination to restore cabinet government, and it is on results over the next few months on which he will be judged.
We've been asked to keep some sense of perspective, and I think that's right. The question here is whether those who make the law obey the law. That's pretty fundamental. Many have questioned, including some of my constituents, the Prime Minister's honesty and integrity and fitness to hold that office. Now, in judging him, he rightly asked us to wait for all the facts. Sue Gray has made it clear in her update today that she couldn't produce a meaningful report with the facts. So can I ask the Prime Minister the question that the Honourable Lady, the member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington, asked him and to which he didn't give an answer? When Sue Gray produces all of the facts in her full report after the police investigation, will he commit to publish it immediately and in full?
It seems a lot of people attended events in May 2020. The one I recall attending was my grandmother's funeral. She was a wonderful woman. As well as a love for her family, she served her community as a councillor, and she served Dartford Conservative Association loyally for many years. I drove for 3 hours from Staffordshire to Kent. Only 10 people at the funeral. Many people who loved her had to watch online. I didn't hug my siblings. I didn't hug my parents. I gave a eulogy. And then, afterwards, I didn't even go to her house for a cup of tea. I drove back 3 hours from Kent to Staffordshire. Does the Prime Minister think I'm a fool?
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister answered questions in this House on the initial Sue Gray report, and we saw the usual bluster and thrashing about stream of unconsciousness that we're used to. But in reply to one particular question, I think from my right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition, in thrashing about, he threw in the question of Jimmy Savile. Now, actually, I think he was factually wrong on that. Yeah. But there are many, many victims of that awful, awful person. Yeah. And for him to use that, that scandal and that tragedy in the way that I felt was inappropriate, tasteless, but perhaps out of order, and I'd seek your guidance on his use of that awful, awful example.
Mr. Speaker, we are building a coalition.
Order.
We are building a coalition.
Just a minute. Prime Minister, I'm this way, not that way. Maybe Specsavers might be the answer to see where I am. And can I just say, Dame Caroline Dinage is desperate to get the next question to you. Dame Diana Caroline Dinage.
Lots of words, lots of bluster, no answers. Word of warning. Word of warning, Prime Minister. That's not going to work with the police.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand the Prime Minister has been heard singing "I Will Survive" in recent days. I would suggest that he would be better off singing "Careless Whisper" instead, because, Mr. Speaker, in 2017, Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe was condemned to an extended prison sentence in Iran because of the careless words of this Prime Minister. Now, in 2022, this week, my friend, the Leader of the Opposition, was hounded by thugs outside this Parliament because of the careless, disgraceful words of this Prime Minister. So will the Prime Minister do the decent thing? Will he reconsider his words, repent and resign?
Mr. Speaker, I don't think that she should either let the thugs and yobs who bullied and harassed the right honourable gentleman off the hook any more, because they are culpable, any more than she should let the Iranian government off the hook, Mr. Speaker, because they are culpable.